May 2nd, 2025.
团建不尬，温泉不凉，亲子不闹，烧烤不焦，来凌云温泉度假山庄，泡走 KPI，烤出团队魂，亲子乐翻天，露营数星星，放松身心，点燃激情，凌云等你来嗨，电话62322777。48快装，全国连锁，专做旧房翻新，400-665-8848，旧房翻新就找48快装，400-665-8848，老房翻新就选48快装，400-665-8848。
May 1st, democracy now is about 15 minutes into this.
如果没有遇见你，我将会是在哪里？日子过得怎么样？人生是否要珍惜？也许人生某一人过着平凡的日子，不知道会不会也有爱情甜如蜜。任时光匆匆流去，我只在乎你，心甘情愿感染你的气息。人生几何能够得到知己？失去生命的力量也不可惜。所以我求求你，别让我离开你。除了你，我不能感到一丝丝情意。有那么一天，你说即将要离去，我会迷失我自己，走入无边人海里。不要什么诺言，只要天天在一起。我不能只依靠，偏偏回忆活下去。任时光匆匆流去，我只在乎你，心甘情愿感染你的气息。人生几何能够得到知己？失去生命的力量也不可惜。所以我求求你，别让我离开你。除了你，我不能感到一丝丝情意。任时光匆匆流去，我只在乎你，心甘情愿感染你的气息。人生几何能够得到知己？失去生命的力量也不可惜。所以我求求你，别让我离开你。除了你，我不能感到一丝丝情意。
A popular melody in the Americas. Station change time to Democracy Now!
C 89.5 FM. Jojo.
The views and opinions expressed on the following program are those of the producers and/or the persons appearing on the program, and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of CIUT FM.
From New York, this is Democracy Now!
And I am saying it clear and loud. Yes. To President Trump and his cabinet. Yes. I am not afraid of you.
Columbia University student and Palestinian activist Mohsen Madawi has been released from an immigration jail in Vermont after a federal judge compared the targeting of student activists to McCarthyism and Red Scare. We'll hear Mohsen Madawi in his own words and speak to one of his attorneys. Then it's May Day. As protests call for worker and immigrant rights, we'll talk to a New York father whose 19-year-old son was detained in the Bronx, then flown with over 230 other Venezuelans to a notorious mega prison in El Salvador, where he's being held incommunicado.
My message to Merwell, if he hears me, he is to be strong. God is with us, and he needs to know that we are doing everything possible to get him out of there soon. His family in Venezuela is doing everything they can. Just like me here, I am making my voice heard, so that it is heard and reaches the ears of everyone, and that justice is done, because I told you from my heart, he is not a criminal.
Plus, as the United States and Ukraine sign a new rare earth minerals deal, we'll speak to environmental reporter Antonia Yuhas. Her recent piece, Is Trump's Minerals Deal a Fossil Fuel Shakedown? All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. A federal judge in Vermont has granted bail and released from ICE jail Palestinian Columbia University student Mohsen Madawi while he challenges the Trump administration's efforts to deport him for joining protests against Israel's assault on Gaza. U.S. District Judge Jeffrey Crawford ruled the Trump administration failed to show why Madawi should remain in confinement, condemning, quote, chilling action by the government intended to shut down debate, the judge said. Mohsen Madawi emerged from the courthouse to a jubilant crowd of supporters, both arms in the air, holding up the V for victory sign with his hands, also the gesture for peace.
And I am saying it clear and loud. Yes. To President Trump and his cabinet. Yes. I am not afraid of you.
Mohsen Madawi also asked the crowd to join him in singing We Shall Overcome. Madawi was jailed by ICE in April after appearing for what he was told would be a naturalization test. He was a lead organizer in Colombia's Gaza solidarity protests, the former president of Colombia's Buddhist Association. We'll get the latest on his case after headlines with a member of Mohsen Madawi's legal defense team. Israel's military is continuing its unrelenting attacks on Gaza, killing at least 18 Palestinians today. Israel's killed at least 2,300 Palestinians since it unilaterally ended the ceasefire in mid-March. More than 64,000 Palestinians have been killed since October 2023, and that number is expected to be a far underestimate. The assault continued as the UN Palestinian Refugee Agency, UNRWA, warned the lives of 1 million Palestinian children in Gaza are on the line as Israel's total blockade on the territory enters its 61st day. Some 3,000 aid trucks are lined up at Gaza's border but unable to enter. The blockade has compounded a healthcare crisis with no medicines or equipment entering Gaza and patients unable to leave for treatment elsewhere. This is the mother of a sick 3-year-old child being treated at Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis.
الدكاترة كتبوا لنا علاجات مش متوفرة حتى نجيبها من الصيدليات الموجودة هنا.
Doctors
aren't even available to get from the pharmacies here. My daughter needs this medicine, but it's not available. It's not available anywhere in Gaza's pharmacies. It has to come from outside, and the occupation has closed the crossing and refuses to let medicines through.
This comes as arguments continue at the International Court of Justice over Israel's obligations to provide aid to Gaza. A U.S. State Department lawyer Wednesday defended Israel's ban on UNRWA.
UNRWA is not the only option for providing humanitarian assistance in Gaza. In sum, there is no legal requirement that an occupying power permit a specific third state or international organization to conduct activities in occupied territory that would compromise its security interest.
There should be no occupied
Israel's Channel
territories.
13 has aired a report detailing how the administration of former President Joe Biden allowed Israel to carry out its slaughter in Gaza with total impunity, with one senior official admitting it amounted to, quote, killing and destroying for the sake of killing and destroying, unquote. In Syria, at least 30 people have been killed in recent days amidst violent clashes between government forces and armed groups on the outskirts of Damascus. Israel intervened by launching air attacks on Syria, claiming it was defending the local Druze community. Syria immediately condemned all forms of foreign intervention, unquote. The transitional Syrian government, which came to power after the ouster of President Bashar al-Assad in December, has said its restored order in the region is committed to protecting all communities in Syria. U.S. and Ukrainian officials signed a deal late Wednesday that'll give the U.S. a stake in Ukraine's mineral reserves as part of a joint investment fund with Kyiv. Details of the deal have yet to be released, including any guarantees of U.S. security assistance for Ukraine. Trump has sought to frame the agreement as repayment for U.S. military aid to Ukraine since Russia's invasion in February 2022. The Ukrainian parliament will still need to ratify the deal. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent spoke after the signing of the agreement.
Today's agreement signals clearly to Russian leadership that the Trump administration is committed to a peace process centered on a free, sovereign, and prosperous Ukraine over the long term. It's time for this cruel and senseless war to end.
We'll have more on the story later in the broadcast with investigative journalist Antonia Juhas. Her recent piece is Trump's Minerals Deal, a Fossil Fuel Shakedown. The Trump administration has spoken to leaders of Libya and Rwanda about the possibility of sending undocumented immigrants to those two countries. That's according to CNN, which reports the U.S. is also seeking a so-called safe third country agreement that would allow the U.S. to send asylum seekers to Libya, including people with no criminal records. This comes as President Trump said in an ABC News interview he has the power to bring back a Maryland father the U.S. government admitted to expelling to an El Salvador prison in error, but that he will not do so, despite court orders mandating the return of GLMR Garcia. Trump was interviewed by ABC's Terry Moran.
This is not an innocent, wonderful gentleman from Maryland. I'm not saying he's a good guy. It's about the rule of law. The order from the Supreme Court stands,
He
sir.
came into our country illegally.
You could get him back. There's a phone on this desk.
I could.
You could pick it up, and like all the power of the presidency, you could call up the president of El Salvador and say, send him back right now.
And if he were the gentleman that you say he is, I would do that.
The comments contradict previous White House statements the U.S. has no power to return Abrego Garcia. During the interview, Trump grew increasingly agitated and repeatedly interrupted Terry Moran to falsely claim Abrego Garcia had tattoos on his knuckles reading MS-13, a reference to the MS-13 gang. In fact, those characters were photoshopped into a picture of tattooed symbols on Abrego Garcia's left hand shared by the White House on social media. Moran made this point in the interview. In Texas, a group of 31 Venezuelan men facing possible deportation to El Salvador's Sicat prison, notorious for its torture and human rights abuses, used their bodies to spell out a cry for help Monday after they spotted a news drone flying above the immigration jail where they're being held. The men formed the letters SOS in a human formation in the courtyard of the Blue Bonnet Detention Facility, which is operated by the for-profit Management and Training Corporation. federal judge in Miami has ordered Florida police departments to stop deputizing officers to act as immigration enforcement agents. U.S. District Judge Kathleen Williams' order came as she prepared to issue a preliminary injunction against a new state law that makes it a misdemeanor for undocumented immigrants to enter Florida by eluding immigration agents. In California, a federal judge has issued a preliminary injunction barring Border Patrol officers from stopping people without reasonable suspicion that they're undocumented and preventing them from making warrantless arrests unless they have credible evidence a person is likely to flee. The injunction follows reports that Border Patrol agents carrying out raids in California's Central Valley rounded up day laborers and farm workers regardless of their actual immigration status, rather than fulfilling their mission of arresting immigrants with serious criminal backgrounds. In Burkina Faso, thousands of people rallied in support of the interim president, Ibrahim Traoré, on Wednesday after military rulers said they foiled a plot to overthrow his transitional government. He seized power after a 2022 coup and moved to end military ties with the former colonizer France. Protesters also condemned recent comments by General Michael Langley, head of the U.S. military's Africa Command, who accused Traoré of using Burkina Faso's gold reserves to benefit himself rather than the people. This is a protester in Ouagadougou.
Words like democracy, human rights, no one can teach that in Africa. The African continent was the first continent that produced democracy, but not that of the West, which consists of burning countries, burning continents that do not think like them. Here we are today so that our country remains standing, so that our continent remains standing.
Protesters took to the streets of Panama City Wednesday to condemn the signing of a memorandum between the U.S. and Panama that would allow U.S. troops to deploy around the Panama Canal for military training.
We protest because they have stomped over the sovereignty of entire generations who have fought. They dumped our sovereignty to the trash by signing a memorandum of understanding that allows foreign military presence in Panama. Down with the memorandum. Down with the memorandum. Sovereign Panama.
President Trump has repeatedly threatened to take back the Panama Canal, as he's pledged to annex Canada. In Mexico, rights groups are demanding justice for Marco Antonio Suastegui, an environmental activist from Guerrero State who was shot 2 weeks ago and died on Friday. Suastegui helped lead the successful grassroots resistance against the La Parota hydroelectric dam project, which would have devastated the local community. In Pennsylvania, students at Swarthmore College set up a new protest encampment, naming the site the Hossam Shabbat Liberated Zone, in honor of the 23-year-old Palestinian journalist killed by Israel in Gaza in March. Students are demanding Swarthmore, quote, divest from Israeli occupation, aggression, and apartheid and declare itself a sanctuary campus, unquote. And tens of thousands of people are taking to the streets across the United States for May Day, International Workers' Day. Over 1,000 actions in more than 1,000 cities will protest the Trump administration's policies. Worker-led demonstrations are also taking place in countries across the globe. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.
And I'm Narmeen Sheikh. Welcome to our listeners and viewers across the country and around the world. We begin today's show in Vermont, where Columbia University student and Palestinian activist Mohsen Mahdawi was released after more than 2 weeks in U.S. immigration custody. Mahdawi is a green card holder from Palestine who was born and raised in a refugee camp in the occupied West Bank. He was arrested on April 14th when he appeared for what he was told would be a citizenship interview. Mahdawi had participated in the Palestinian Solidarity protests at Columbia last year. He was also president of the Columbia University Buddhist Association. He was freed on bail on Wednesday by U.S. District Judge Jeffrey Crawford, who criticized the Trump administration's handling of the case. In his ruling, Crawford wrote that Mahdawi had made, quote, substantial claims that his detention is the result of a retaliation for protected speech that he engaged in as a college student on the Columbia campus. Crawford went on to write, quote, "The court also considers the extraordinary setting of this case and others like it. Legal residents not charged with crimes or misconduct are being arrested and threatened with deportation for stating their views on the political issues of the day. Our nation has seen times like this before, especially during the Red Scare and Palmer raids of 1919-1920 that led to the deportation of hundreds of people suspected of anarchist or communist views," Crawford wrote.
After Mohsen Madawi left the federal courthouse in Burlington, Vermont, he addressed supporters.
And we send a clear message as well that if we have faith in our beliefs, unshakable beliefs, which is the belief that justice is inevitable, we will not fear anyone, because our fight is a fight for love, is a fight for democracy, is a fight for humanity. And I am saying it clear and loud. Yes. To President Trump and his cabinet. Yes. I am not afraid of you. Never give up on the idea that justice would prevail, and that we have to come together to bring our voices and our hearts and raise them, not only for America, not only for this system of democracy that has checks and balances, and this court is part of it, but also for our humanity. We have to restore and reform the international order and abide by international law as a first step towards justice. We must stand up for humanity, because the rest of the world, not only Palestine, is watching us, and what is going to happen in America is going to affect the rest of the world. That's right. I will end up by saying to my people in Palestine, I feel your pain, I see you suffering, and I see the freedom, and it is very, very soon. Free Palestine.
Freedom for
Columbia
Palestine.
University student and Palestinian activist Mohsen Madawi.
Freedom for all the
Speaking
Jewish
in Burlington, Vermont, Wednesday
Palestinians,
after he was
all the
free
Christian
after over
Palestinians,
2 weeks in an
all the
immigration
Muslim
jail.
Palestinians,
We're joined now by
all
a
the
member of
Zoroastrian
his legal team,
Palestinians.
Shaza Abushidalal. She's a
Every
staff attorney with the
culture
Clear Project at
and
CUNY
spiritual
School
path
of Law.
in
Shaza, thank you so
Palestine.
much for being with us. I know you've just returned from
Jews,
Vermont, where you
Christian,
were with Mohsen.
Muslims,
Can you talk about
all faiths.
the significance of what the judge ruled, and what are the conditions of Mohsen's release?
All
Thank you
faiths
for
belong.
having me, Amy. I can't overstate the significance of this ruling, and the fact that Mohsen walked free yesterday and wakes up today in his home in Vermont, not in an ICE detention facility, being punished for speaking out for Palestinian lives and freedom and against the genocide in Gaza. The judge yesterday ordered him released on bail. And this is, release on his own recognizance. So he will be able to return to his home in Vermont, continue his studies at Columbia University, complete his undergraduate degree, and continue on to a master's program in the fall, and continue his advocacy for Palestinian life and dignity and freedom. And that's of paramount importance to him. And it was of paramount importance to the judge too. The judge acknowledged that, this is on a backdrop of a chapter of U.S. history that is repressive and evocative of moments before, where the government attempts to wield, the immigration system, detention, to punish people for their First Amendment protected speech, for their political advocacy, and the judge situated his decision on that backdrop, in that context.
So, Shasa, as you said, he can come back to New York. He can return to his studies at Columbia, begin his master's degree next year. Are there any other restrictions on his movement? In other words, he can come from Vermont to New York, but can he go anywhere else? And what is the remaining immigration case against him?
So he's released pending the culmination of his federal litigation, so his habeas litigation in federal court in Vermont. And so the conditions reflect that. His court case is in Vermont, so he needs to stay around, close to the court's jurisdiction, in order to see that process through. And that's what that's going to look like.
And the Trump administration initially did want to move him as well, Mohsen, to the same Louisiana immigration jail that Mahmoud Khalil, two other students, Rumeysa Ozturk, are held in. How come he was not sent to Louisiana but to Vermont instead?
That's exactly right. The administration was playing the same card and attempting to do the same exact thing that they did with Mahmoud Khalil, Rumeysa Ozturk, Badr Khan Suri. They took him, abducted him at his naturalization interview in the final moments after he had signed saying that he would take an oath to the Constitution. Masked men entered the room and abducted him, and then they attempted to swiftly take him to the airport in order to commence a route towards Louisiana. And the only thing that stopped him is Mohsen's legal team's intervention. They filed the habeas petition before they had the opportunity to put him on a flight. And in fact, they took him all the way to the airport and missed a flight out from Burlington, Vermont at the very last moment. So we had the benefit of having learned what the Trump administration's playbook is on all of these cases, to whisk people, abduct them, take them away from their communities into fora that are favorable for the government, and then present a series of delay tactics in their federal court proceedings on the basis of the fact that they are now in another state like Louisiana. And so ultimately, Mohsen was able to remain in his home state of Vermont, surrounded by his community, and anybody who's seen footage or had the fortune of being at court or in front of court yesterday in the District of Vermont was able to see the power of that community and how people showed up in outrage at what is happening to Mohsen, and all the other people like Mahmoud and Rumeysa and Badr Khan Suri, who do not have the benefit of being in their home state and are still waiting to have their motions for release heard by the respective federal courts that they are in.
And so in the case of Rumeysa, the Fulbright scholar from Tufts, the international graduate student, a federal judge has ruled her case must be heard in Vermont, but she is still in Louisiana being held there because she was moved there. Shahzad, so Mohsen gets to come to New York for graduation at Columbia University?
Yes, he does.
I want to thank you very much for being with us. Shahzad Abushi Dalal, staff attorney with the CLEAR Project at CUNY School of Law, and a member of Mohsen Mahdawi's legal defense team. She's just back from Vermont, here in New York, as she was with him yesterday as he was released. When we come back, today is May Day. Massive protests planned across the country. We'll talk to a New York father whose 19-year-old son was detained in the Bronx, then flown with 230 other Venezuelans to a notorious mega prison in El Salvador, where he's being held incommunicado. Stay with us.
This song makes me think of another song. This song is in the Catholic Book of Praise, I'm pretty sure. Sounds like a witch hunt is going on in the United States of America. They used to hunt American Indians.
Singing Spirit of Life with his supporters after he was released Wednesday in Burlington, Vermont from an ICE jail.
Witch hunt.
This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org. I'm Amy Goodman.
Sounds like a witch hunt.
May Day demonstrations are underway worldwide, with most protests across the United States today focused on workers' rights and resistance to the Trump administration's crackdown on immigrants and asylum seekers, including the transfer of over 230 men to El Salvador's terrorism confinement center, CCOT, infamous for its human rights abuses. The protests come amid reports the Trump administration is seeking to send immigrants with criminal records to Rwanda and Libya. That's according to CNN, which also reports the U.S. is seeking to send some asylum seekers apprehended at the U.S. border to Libya, including people with no criminal records. This is Secretary of State Marco Rubio speaking at a cabinet meeting Wednesday, sitting next to President Trump.
We are actively searching for other countries to take people from third countries. So we are active, not just El Salvador, we are working with other countries to say, we want to send you some of the most despicable things to your countries. We do that as a favor to us, and the further away from America, the better, so they can't come back across the border.
This week, President Trump said he has the power to bring back Maryland father Gilmar Abrego Garcia, who the U.S. government admitted to expelling to an El Salvador prison in error, but that he will not do so despite court orders. It's been 2 months since the Trump administration rounded up and transferred 238 Venezuelan immigrants from the U.S. to the notorious maximum security mega prison in El Salvador. The men are being held incommunicado without access to their attorneys or relatives, languishing in what appears to be indefinite detention in CCOT.
This week, Democracy Now! Spoke to the father of a 19-year-old Venezuelan teenager who was among them. His name is Merwil Gutierrez. He was detained by Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE agents, outside his apartment here in New York in the Bronx on February 24th. He was sent to El Salvador, despite having an open asylum case in the U.S. Merwil's family and lawyers note he has no criminal history, no tattoos. One of the features Trump officials have used to wrongfully accuse Venezuelan immigrants and others of being gang members and to expel them from the country without due process under the Wartime Alien Enemies Act of 1798. Merwil's cousin, Luis Acosta, witnessed the February arrest from his window. He described seeing at least 10 officers ambushing Merwil and questioning him. His cousin says authorities were searching for a different person, but they forcibly took Merwil away anyway, knowing he was not that person. One of the officers grabbed the teen by the arm and put him inside a car. Merwil's father, Wilmer Gutierrez, says he's been unable to communicate with his son since he was taken to an ICE jail in Texas, then transferred to El Salvador in March. Democracy Now!'s Juan Gonzalez and I spoke with Wilmer Gutierrez through a translator. We were also joined by Ithar El-Khatani, editor-in-chief of Documented, a nonprofit newsroom focusing on New York's immigrant community that broke Merwil's story in a report headlined, "ICE took his son from their Bronx home. Now his 19-year-old is in Bukele's mega prison in El Salvador." It was written by Paz Radovich. I began by asking Wilmer Gutierrez to describe what happened to his son.
Buenos días, mi nombre es Wilmer, soy el padre de Merwil Gutierrez.
Good morning. My name is Wilmer. I'm Merwil Gutierrez's father.
Entrando al edificio.
The day he was arrested, he was entering the building where we live.
Yo me encontraba trabajando y me llama mi sobrino y me dice que
That day I was working and my nephew called me and told me that my son was being grabbed by the police to take him away without explanation. They were apparently looking for another person and they grabbed my son, handcuffed him and put him in the car.
Lo metieron en el carro y uno de los policías le pregunta el nombre.
One of the policemen asked him his name. He replied that it is Manuel, and the policeman said no, he's not who we want. Since the good ones are the bad ones too, the other police said.
Since the good ones are the bad ones
They
too?
took my son to the precinct.
What the
I
hell?
returned to
Man?
the precinct. I thought
That
that he
sounds
was
like
going to be
Nazi shit.
released that same night, and they were going to let him go back home. Because I know my son was not doing anything wrong. He was just going into our building when they arrested him.
Mr. Gutierrez, could you tell us when did you learn that he had been transferred to El Salvador?
Yo me enteré cuando lo mandaron a El Salvador.
I found out that they had sent him to El Salvador when he contacted me Saturday morning.
El día sábado en la mañana. Y de allí no tuve más comunicación.
And from that point on, I had no further communication with him.
Salieron los vuelos a El Salvador que habían llevado un grupo.
When they were sending flights to El Salvador, we learned that they had taken a group of Venezuelans. At that time, they had not sent any planes deporting Venezuelans to their home country.
Y estuvimos indagando.
We inquired, but couldn't obtain any information until a list of names of everyone who was deported came out, and my son's name was on that list.
Do you feel betrayed by the government, that the same government that allowed you to come into the United States with humanitarian parole has now sent your son to another country to prison?
Sí, efectivamente, porque o sea, nosotros vinimos para acá con un sueño.
Yes, indeed. Because we came here with a dream, we did not think that this injustice was ever going to happen. My son has not committed any crime. He never appeared in front of a court. He was not charged with a crime or had a trial.
Un tipo de cargo, algo así, no. Ellos lo agarraron y se lo llevaron a todo a un avión y lo llevaron y...
No, they grabbed him and then put him on a plane and took him to El Salvador. And that's where they have sent others. They were kidnapped because they did not go through a formal process.
Sounds like a
Nor
witch
did they
hunt.
sign any papers saying where they were going.
Sounds like a witch hunt.
We hope that if they put him on a plane, they would return my son to Venezuela, where we have family. And look where he ended up, where his rights as a human being are being violated right now. They shattered our dreams.
I want to bring Ithar El-Khatami into this conversation, the editor-in-chief of Documented. As we hear this utterly painful story that Wilmer conveys about his teenage son being taken to the notorious Salvadoran prison, I want to go back to that night, February 24th, as your reporter at Documented has told the story, interviewed the cousin. Explain exactly what he saw and heard the agents doing.
Thanks, Amy, for having me. Thank you for sharing your story so honestly. I think before I just get to that, I just wanted to add that, you know, when we hear about the numbers and you hear 238 kind of deported, it's kind of sometimes easy to forget that these are real human lives and real impact. You know, an investigation showed that out of those 238 young people, nearly 75% of them actually have no criminal record, right? And we had documented or continuing to follow similar stories, other young men in their early 20s who also have no criminal records and who are also deported. So part of what we do at Documented, which is so unique, which is we are directly connected to immigrant communities, right? And we actually found the story through WhatsApp. As our reporter is in a group where she actually managed to get in touch with Wilmer. So when we sent her to the community, obviously developing kind of trust, being able to discuss with his family. So Louise, who has actually left now their apartment out of fear that he would also be kind of caught up in a collateral arrest, which is exactly what we think was happening here. He was upstairs and actually saw it through a window. He said he saw nearly a dozen agents kind of gathering around. And what really made this so unique, which is he heard one agent talking about how this isn't who they were looking for, and another agent say, but take him anyway. And I would say that kind of pervasive fear that we're seeing now in immigrant communities, which is even if you have no criminal record, even if you have status, even if you have a legal case, even if the Supreme Court has argued that you have a right to argue against your deportation, you might still be taken away. So this case, as tragic as it is, we're seeing it play out in multiple ways across the country and in New York.
So talk about how the administration has responded. I mean, even when they publicly say, as in the case of GLMR, they publicly say they made a mistake. They also say they're not going to bring back GLMR Abrego Garcia. They said it in court to a judge. But talk about what how the Trump administration has responded and what access that Wilmer has to the courts right now.
Yeah. I would say that in this case, the administration talked about it being an administrative error, right? And having no right, which is a step kind of even beyond. In Kilmar's case, that it was an administrative error and that we can't do anything. So even if you have the courts now saying that they actually have to facilitate his return, the administration actually isn't doing anything. And now you have kind of a search in proceedings to see, are they actually stopping this? I would say in Wilmer's case, he's gotten a lot of media attention. But up until this day, even though we talked directly to, politicians across the spectrum, we directly had an exclusive statement from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez expressing kind of, their disillusionment, their disappointment, their kind of, we will take action. To this day, there really has been no update on the case. The lawyer in the case involved has no updates. We still don't actually know if he's fully what his situation is, what he is. And again, to remind everybody, he's 19 years old, Venezuelan, deported to a prison, not even in his country. And despite the media attention, there really has been no update as of yet.
Wilmer, I know how incredibly hard this is for you. Talk about your decision to speak out.
Bueno, yo estoy haciendo esto que se haga sentir en el mundo entero por la violación que le hicieron a todos los venezolanos.
Well, I am doing this so that the violation that they did to all Venezuelans, including my son, is known throughout the world.
Yes,
because it is really anti-human
Yes,
that they
yes,
grab
it's
the person
anti-human.
and treat them as they
Really
please and
anti-human.
violate their rights. If they do not want us here, they should deport them to their native country, not send them to a prison, because they are not terrorists. They are not gang members. They do not belong to any gang or anything like that. So they are violating my son's rights and they are damaging his mind.
Están estropeando la mente. Imagínese, mi hijo es un niño todavía, porque usted lo puede ver así, pero él es un niño, en su mentalidad tampoco ha madurado. Y ahorita le están estropeando su mente. Imagínese usted.
My son is still a child. His mentality has not matured yet. And right now they are damaging his mind. Imagine what he is feeling at this moment there. Every day he wakes up knowing that they have not yet taken him out of that place where they have kidnapped him, where they are violating his human rights. I decided to speak out because I really want this to be heard, even by the president of El Salvador himself. And we asked him to respect those Venezuelans, because my son has nothing to do with all this. He has not had any problem with that country, and the president of El Salvador should release him.
Yes.
Wilmer, talk about the risk you're taking in coming forward. Are you afraid that you could be next, even if your son was mistakenly taken?
Bueno, el miedo es una cosa que nos inculcan, como quien dice, pero miedo no tengo, porque si mira lo que está pasando a mi hijo.
Well, fear is something that they instill in us, but I am not afraid, because if you look at what is happening to my son, and if something happens to me, the only thing that matters is that at least I made people aware of what has happened to my son. I made them understand that the government is violating the laws.
De las personas que estamos hablando por nuestros familiares.
And if they do something against people like myself, who are advocating for our relatives, then they will realize that what they are doing is a violation of human rights. Because they do not want to respect the laws, they are violating them. The courts told them not to fly those planes to El Salvador, and they still did it. We can imagine what is going to happen going forward if they do not put a stop to this government, because they are violating all the laws and doing whatever they want.
Have you ever been apart from Merwil this long, for 2 months?
No, Mergul y yo siempre.
Merwil and I have always been practically like brothers, always together, until now that they have separated us.
Do you have hope that he'll be released? That you'll see him here again?
Mergul y yo, por lo menos, toda la vida hemos vivido juntos, él siempre ha andado conmigo. Lo único.
Merwild and I have lived together all our lives. He has always been with me, and the only time we weren't together is when he was in classes in high school, focusing on his studies. He would always walk with me, work with me. When we were still living in Venezuela, we were always together. And as I am telling you now, we had never been separated until now they have separated us, and it is very hard.
If you could talk to your son right now, if you could talk to Merwil, look right into the camera, and what would you say to him?
Bueno, mi mensaje para Merwil.
Well, my message to Merwil, if he hears me, he is to be strong.
Que Dios está con nosotros y que estamos haciendo todo lo posible para que él salga de allá pronto.
God is with us, and he needs to know that we are doing everything possible to get him out of there soon. His family in Venezuela is doing everything they can. Just like me here, I am making my voice heard so that it is heard and reaches the ears of everyone, and that justice is done, because I told you from my heart, he is not a criminal. Not all Venezuelans are doing what Trump's government says we are doing, and I hope they have a little respect for that too. If they want to send everyone to their home country, do it with due process, not how they are doing it, as if we were criminals. Even animals don't deserve that. They treat us as if we were a commodity. And from my heart, I tell Merwil that we are doing everything possible and that we will be together soon.
Wilmer Gutierrez, father of 19-year-old Merwil Gutierrez, who is detained by Immigration and Customs Enforcement by ICE agents outside his apartment here in New York in the Bronx on February 24th, and was sent to El Salvador despite having an open asylum case in the U.S. He has not been heard from since. At CCOT, they're kept incommunicado. We'll link to the report on this case by Documented. Headlined, ICE took his son from their Bronx home, now his 19-year-olds in Bukele's mega prison in El Salvador. And you can go to our full interview with Wilmer about Merwil at our website in Spanish at democracynow.org/es. When we come back, as the United States and Ukraine sign a new rare earth minerals deal, we'll speak to the environmental journalist Antonia Ujas. Her new piece, Is Trump's Minerals Deal a Fossil Fuel Shakedown? Stay with us.
It's a witch hunt, a witch hunt, a witch hunt in USA.
Sorry about this, folks. Normally, I'm playing this, it's nearly midnight. And as it is here, it's 10 o'clock in the morning. There is power in a factory, power in the land, power in the hand of the worker. But it all amounts to nothing if together we don't stand. There is power in a union. Now the lessons of the past were all learned with workers' blood. The mistakes.
Power Democracy Now! Studio in 2011. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Nermeen Sheikh.
U.S. and Ukrainian officials have signed a deal to give the U.S. a stake in Ukraine's mineral reserves as part of a joint investment fund with Kyiv. Details of the agreement have yet to be released, but according to the Financial Times, the deal does not include explicit security guarantees from the United States. Trump has sought to frame the agreement as repayment of U.S. military aid to Ukraine since Russia's invasion starting in February 2022. The Ukrainian parliament will still need to ratify the deal. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent spoke after signing the agreement.
Today's agreement signals clearly to Russian leadership that the Trump administration is committed to a peace process centered on a free, sovereign, and prosperous Ukraine over the long term. It's time for this cruel and senseless war to end.
We're joined now by Antonia Juhas, award-winning, longtime investigative journalist covering oil and energy. In March, Antonia wrote a piece for Rolling Stone headlined, "Is Trump's Minerals Deal a Fossil Fuel Shakedown?" She's also been reporting on the Trump administration's gutting of climate and environmental regulations and programs. Joining us now from Washington, D.C. Antonia, welcome back to Democracy Now! So, if you can talk about this piece, or this deal that was just signed yesterday between Ukrainian and U.S. officials, the rare earth minerals deal, what does it entail, and what do you think it represents?
Sure, and thanks again for having me. Good morning. So this is actually a reconstruction investment fund set up between the U.S. and Ukraine. It's been dubbed the minerals deal for a while, and that's a bit of a misnomer. The original idea for the agreement started years ago after the initial Russian invasion of Ukraine, when Zelensky was trying to keep the Republican Congress willing to keep its investments going in military aid to Ukraine under the Biden administration by saying, okay, we'll give you a stake essentially in the Ukrainian economy if you'll keep supporting us. What it then morphed into under the Trump administration is really a grab of Ukraine's natural resources, some of which could involve rare earth minerals, but I would say the larger focus is Ukraine's oil, gas, coal, its fossil fuels, and opening those up to U.S. investment, but I would say even more so to Russian control. The elimination of Russian sanctions is the larger goal for Putin, and then opening up Russia once again to U.S. oil companies. And the deal that was signed yesterday has had some changes since the initial agreement was put forward in late February. And of course, that was the deal that Zelensky had come to the White House to sign at the end of February. That was the intention of that meeting in the White House, that then became this complete made-for-TV moment launched by J.D. Vance and President Trump to shame Zelensky, to degrade Zelensky, to put him down in his place, to make Zelensky aware that Trump had realigned to Russia and that Zelensky was going to need to play ball on anything if he wanted anything out of the White House. This deal was supposed to be signed that day. It wasn't. There's been some negotiations since then. The deal put on the table yesterday, I would say, is certainly better than the deal that was originally presented at the end of February.
To who?
But it's got a lot of
Better to USA or better to
So,
Ukraine?
Antonia, could you explain what some of those problems are? I mean, Zelensky, in this highly public and contentious meeting at the White House in February, had said initially he described the draft agreement as asking him to, quote, sell his country off. So, if you could say what were the obstacles then, and what has been resolved in this final agreement, which still has to be ratified by the Ukrainian parliament?
Yeah, I mean, Okay, so first, let's just get the, what the deal entails really clear. Again, it's being called the minerals agreement, but Ukraine doesn't have, we don't know that it has a lot of minerals. It definitely has titanium. It's producing titanium and graphite. It might have lithium. It might also have a host of what are called rare earth minerals. That's 12 metals that are pretty critical for renewable energy, and there's definitely an interest, and has been, in Ukraine to developing the potential of those rare earth minerals. And just to say, the assessment of those minerals is based on a 50-year-old assessment done when Ukraine was part of the Soviet Union. But there's domestic interest in that because there's been a domestic interest in transitioning off of fossil fuels, not only for the betterment of Ukraine, but also to weaken Russia, which is so dependent on its fossil fuels. And so there's been interest in developing those rare earth minerals. But this agreement also includes all of Ukraine's natural resources, oil, gas, coal, and all of its infrastructure as well. That's its critical pipelines that carry gas, for example, through Russia, from Russia through Ukraine, its ports and that infrastructure, its gas holding facilities, and all of that is fair game. Its nuclear facilities, its refineries. And the initial deal that was put on the table seemed to imply essentially that the United States, so it creates a fund where all of Ukraine's future profits from all of its natural resources and infrastructure would go into the fund. The U.S. would also contribute to the fund, but it was unclear how much money it would put in. And then it was also unclear and seemed to imply that the United States would have majority control over decisions on how those natural resources would be used, over how the money would be spent, and wouldn't contribute really any money into it, rather have that money be a payoff, which is how Trump was talking about it, for previous military aid to Ukraine. What's different now is that it seems clear that it's going to be a 50-50 decision-making split between the United States and Ukraine over the natural resources, over the spending of the fund, that previous military aid won't be paid off through the fund, but that any future U.S. military aid could be considered the contribution to the fund. So the U.S. wouldn't be putting money into reconstruction, it would be putting money into military aid. Now, that's better, but just to say there is no history of an agreement like this before. The United States usually provides reconstruction aid, which is grants or loans that support reconstruction. And then if it wants to invest in a country, it signs contracts to do that. You don't have an agreement that says, in exchange for us continuing to provide you military aid, we're going to gain 50% of the decision-making and control over all of your future natural resources. That's unprecedented. Honestly, even if you go back to the U.S. invasion of Iraq, even the U.S. occupation government of Iraq wasn't this explicit in the type of control over resources that the U.S. government was going to be given. And of course, the U.S. doesn't occupy Ukraine. There's a Russian invasion of Ukraine. The other key problem is that in the discussions over the agreement, Trump continually says that basically what Ukraine has gotten is we will help you get peace and you won't lose your entire country to Russia. That's, what Ukraine gets. What it's likely to have to cede is Crimea and the territory that was taken by the Russians since 2014 and 2022, which also includes some of Ukraine's richest oil and gas reserves, offshore, onshore, coal, and it's a lot of its industrial heart in the Donbass region. So that would mean that Russia would continue to control those areas. And again, if Trump moves forward, if Trump moves forward on eliminating sanctions, then all of Russia is opened up to U.S. oil and gas companies once again.
We want to thank you so much for being with us, Antonia Juhas, award-winning, longtime investigative journalist covering oil and energy. We will link to your piece that you did recently for Rolling Stone, Is Trump's Minerals Deal a Fossil Fuel Shakedown, and have you back to talk about Trump's record on the environment. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org. I'm Amy Goodman with Nermeen Sheikh.
The UN is warning ongoing U.S. attacks on Yemen pose a deadly risk to civilians after a U.S. strike on a migrant detention center in the north of the country killed at least 68 people Monday and injured dozens more. Most or all of the victims are believed to be asylum seekers from African nations. The U.S. has killed over 250 people and carried out over 800 strikes on Yemen since March 15th, after Houthi fighters vowed to resume targeting ships in the Red Sea in an attempt to pressure Israel to end its assault and siege on Gaza.
We go now to Oxford, England, where we're joined by Helen Lackner, author of several books on Yemen, including Yemen in Crisis, The Road to War, and Yemen, Poverty and Conflict. She's been involved with Yemen for over half a century, lived there for a total of more than 15 years between the 1970s and the 2010s. Helen Lackner, thanks so much for being with us. 800 strikes in these last few weeks. Talk about the significance of this.
Well, thank you for showing some interest in what's happening in Yemen. Actually, by now it's more than 1,000 strikes. So we've got much worse, and your death count is distinctly about half the actual number of people who've been killed. So basically, you've now a situation where the U.S. has been bombing Yemen on an absolutely nightly basis since the 15th of March. I think not a single night has gone by without any bombs on the area of Yemen that's controlled by the Houthi supposedly rebels. So this is the situation that you're dealing with, and not only, of course, have many people now been killed, but massive amounts of infrastructure has been destroyed, and people who are living in the country are suffering on a daily basis from basically terror and fright of from being attacked and possibly being bombed and killed any time.
Well, Helen Lackner, if you could also talk about other Trump policies that have immiserated a population that is already on the brink of starvation, what Trump has done both with U.S. aid, together with these attacks, and other steps that the government has taken, the Trump administration has taken since taking office in January.
Yes, the two other elements that are affecting the Yemeni population are, one, the complete cut of USAID and assistance. And, for example, Yemen was the worst humanitarian crisis in the world until it got overtaken by the disasters in Gaza and in Sudan. But it's not that the situation has improved in Yemen. And, for example, US used to finance about 62% of the last year of the financing for the World Food Program, and this year it's financed 0% of the amount available for the World Food Program. And you have about 17 million Yemenis who are dependent on food aid in some form or shape, in addition to all the projects and other activities that were financed by USAID, which have all been stopped. The third element, which has got an even bigger and more long-term impact, has been the declaration of the Houthi movement as foreign terrorist organizations. So that has major impacts. In particular, it means that all commercial activities are going to be extremely difficult to operate throughout Yemen, whether they are under Houthi control or not, because there's very little facility for differentiating. If you're a company that's importing food, or that's importing medical supplies, or that's importing other basic activities for Yemen, how do you prove that you're not doing it in the Houthi area, but only in the areas that are not controlled by the Houthis? So that's another element. It's also preventing the banking sector from operating. It's also preventing the humanitarian organizations from operating. It's also, of course, affecting the United Nations and the efforts to bring some kind of peace negotiations. So all these factors are extremely important in the situation in Yemen at the moment, which are all affected by the new Trump policies since January.
We just have 30 seconds, then we're going to do a post show with you. But I wanted to ask, the U.S. says they're attacking Yemen because the Houthis are attacking ships in the Red Sea. Can you explain why they're doing this?
Well, number one, the Houthis have completely stopped attacking ships in the Red Sea after when the Gaza ceasefire started in January, and they were threatening to restart them, but they did not restart them. And the only things they've been attacking in the Red Sea in the last few weeks have been the U.S. Ship military targets that have been going there. Basically, the Houthis have been doing whatever they have done in that sector, and as well as launching missiles and drones towards Israel, has been with the intention of assisting the Palestinian movement.
Helen Lackner, we want to thank you for being with us. Covered Yemen for half a century. Author of Yemen in Crisis, The Road to War in Yemen, Poverty and Conflict, among many other books. I'm Amy Goodman with Nermeen Sheikh.
The Sound of Your City Spring Fundraiser is coming up soon from May 26th to June 1st. Our volunteer program.
They just talked about Zelensky and when he came earlier in the year to White House to negotiate a peace deal. I'm a person that English is not my first, second, or even third language. Girls that were older than me, like the ethnic Karen. Karen is how it's spelled. Karen is how it's pronounced. The girls at the ethnic Karen, Newfoundlanders, Maritimers, some other indigenous American youth that are my complexion, and such, were explaining to me that for me, it is, and some of us all, in the pit at the school we used to go to, like we were in a pit compared to everybody else, like dumped in a pit kind of thing. For us, it is English as a 6th or 7th language, some of us, and I cannot remember it. So Zelensky, I did some research on Zelensky here. His father or grandfather served in the Russian army against the Nazi threat in Europe. Zelensky is, they say he's Jewish. They don't specify if he's Ashkenazi or actually European Jewish, like people that left the Levant, the Arabian Peninsula, Palestine thousands of years ago and ended up in Europe, as opposed to Far East Asia or Africa. So it is possible he is one of the ethnic Jews of Europe, meaning he didn't convert to his grandparents or great-grandparents didn't convert to Judaism, which would make him an Ashkenazi Jew, which the majority of Israelis are. And the problem with that is that Ashkenazi Jews seem to deny the majority of the Jewish world population. I am not Jewish myself, but I have Jewish friends of various ethnic Jewish stock that are Semitic. There's the Roma, which many of Roma culture, which is called also Gypsy, are Jewish or Christian converted to. Then there's Sephardic Jewish, which is primarily North Africa and Arabia. The oldest, probably, genetic Jew, the ones closely associated to the story in the Bible. Sephardic meaning, I think, shepherd or Sephardic Jews. They are shepherds. There's the Iberian Jews, which are the Jews of the Iberian Peninsula in Europe, mainly Spain and Portugal. Then there's Falashin, which is primarily Ethiopian. Then there's Lamba, which oddly enough genetically tests the highest as the Kohain Jewish priest genetic DNA. And that tribe is primarily in South Africa, and they are black African, as it is called in the United States, the term is said, they are black African. And they test as the highest Jewish priest Kona him DNA there is. So Zelensky here, if I saw him on the street and didn't know who he was, I'd think he's from the Arabians, mostly, or North Africa, mixed European, African, Asian, if I saw him and I didn't know him. So I'm going to play what he says here because I know English is not his second language. It could be his third, or maybe even his fourth. He's obviously the Ukrainian president. He speaks Ukrainian. His grandfather, great-grandfather, father or grandfather served in the Russian army, so he probably speaks Russian as well. Wouldn't be surprised if he knows Polish. See, a lot of languages, unlike English, don't have as many words as English, nor do they have duplicate words like English, or words that sound exactly alike each other, but mean nothing like each other, like knight, K-N-I-G-H-T, or night. Said in this modern United States bad English, both words are said night. But in Old Norse, K-N-I-G-H would have been said knight, as opposed to night. Kno, as opposed to know. Knowledge, as opposed to knowledge. But that's how it'd be pronounced if we were using the Thathark runic alphabet, which has more letters than the English alphabet. English alphabet, which is based off the Roman alphabet. So let me play this Zelensky saying what he said, and it's not a proper English statement, but I know he's trying to convey something to the people in his English, not as his first language, speaking it for the first time officially as far as I know. Put up my volume here. And put you guys on.
Well, during the war.
Right on it so y'all can see what I'm talking about here.
Propaganda tour, Mr. President. Do you disagree that you've had problems bringing people into your military? And do you think that it's respectful to come to the Oval Office of the United States of America and attack the administration that is trying to prevent the destruction of your country?
A lot of questions. Let's start from the beginning. Sure. First of all, during the war, everybody has problems. Even you, but you have nice ocean and don't feel now, but you will feel it in the future. God bless.
You don't know that.
God bless. God bless you.
That statement didn't make sense. And for Donald Trump to try to cut him off and say, you don't know that, that doesn't make sense. Zelensky said, you guys have nice ocean. Y'all won't feel it now, but you'll feel it whatever in the future. Don't make sense to what they're talking about. Which means in his head, his English is not at a level to be talking to the United States President in English without a translator. To me, knowing geography, I think he's getting at the point that Ukraine, if it loses Donbass and Crimea, may be landlocked. A landlocked country. Which means they have to depend on one of their neighbors' countries' good faith and honesty to be able to transport things through that country to their country. My uncle was part of Doctors Without Borders. And in the late 80s, early 90s Common Era, was saying there's a big difference between the World Health Organization and Doctors Without Borders. One is the World Health Organization is like linked to this global push that some people think that globalization means that the West, Western Europe, the colonizers will always keep control of the whole globe. When us ethnic people, when we hear globalization and talk about it, we understand it as the whole world will rise up together equally at the same rate into the future. That's the heart of the 1984 Outer Space Treaty signed between USSR and United States of America. But since that treaty was signed, the United States has did some nefarious stuff worldwide, in Africa and in Asia, installing or assassinating presidential leaders in Africa, South America, the Caribbean, Central America, and Asia. To install that, looking back at it with 2020 vision, it's like what J.D. Vance said. The colonial masters, their version of globalization was they'll maintain control and the whole planet will be their forced labor, sufferers, as they say in English, slaves, which is an improper term in English, which is being used to steal land in Central or Eastern Europe and throughout North America. One, if Egypt, ancient Egypt, claims they had no forced labor, especially no Slavic labor, so therefore the term slave doesn't make sense to Egyptians' history, how is that term used in the United States of America for forced labor? It'd be this: white cargo in the United States of America, a term used on a book title, is about pale humans that were in forced labor in North America. Primarily white Yankee, 13 colonies, USA. While white cargo did exist, and most of them being Slavic, that does not mean the sound phonetic pattern, or the phonetic sound pattern, Slav or slave, should be associated with suffrage, forced labor, or servitude. You see, bad English out of the United States is a tricky language. It takes ethnic cultures, terms, and twists them in this bad English to mean negative, to be used to disassociate those cultures in their original language to force them to speak English. United States, when it started, was started as a melting pot with no official language. Why? Because it's the United States of America, meaning many cultures, many tribes, many states, many different ways of life, many different ways of worshiping, many different ways of praying to the Great Spirit, which some call God, some call Pachamama, some call other things, Amuru Mazda, if you're a Zoroastrian, Zoe, zoology, Zoe, that sound, means life in Greek. The New Testament was originally in Greek. The translation of it into English and a lot of different languages has caused various mistranslations. When people say white sometimes, and they mean spirit, they never mean skin complexion. But those far-right Christian evangelists using white to mean only skin complexion. And if your skin is white, it means you're correct. They are totally incorrect.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because
I'm
you're in no
answering on this
position to
question.
dictate that.
That's exactly what
Remember
we're
this.
doing.
You're in no position.
Do you disagree that you've had problems?
So you hear that? J.D. Vance is badgering Zelensky, a person that just learned to speak English. And Donald Trump is doing the same on international TV. And they think it's cool because they're speaking English well. But if Donald Trump's IQ is not over 100, and his IQ is still 79, like it was in that newsprint article from the 70s, when even his mother said Donald Trump is not bright, it means the United States has been taken a doozy by some lobbyists that do not care about America, do not care about the American people, do not care about the descendants of white cargo, and do not care about the descendants of the people they labeled black either. The people that control the United States of America and the Americas, and by the might of their military, it seems the world, do not care about us. The way they treat Zelensky shows they don't care about people. They only care about what cash they can make. And the bad thing about that is that when my parents' generation went to school, my mom made me swear on my armbands as one thing to remember, to liberate the people. Made me swear on my armband. American Viking, 1,000 years Norsemen have been in the Americas. That's why us, that new Old Norse, are a better chance to defeat the English threat of bad English in the world. Phonetic sound pattern money to our parents' generation. I'm 57, so the generation gap, GAP, the store, doesn't stand for gay and proud. That GAP stands for gap. Mind the gap when you go board the train, the space, the gap, generation gap. Sagapi in Greek means unconditional love for friends and family. It's not the same as eros, erotic love, or philos, just love for friends and family. Sagapi is different. They badger this guy, and Donald Trump was saying months ago he wants to stop all fighting. Doesn't seem like he wants to stop all fighting. It seems he just wants to make cash off whatever he can. And it doesn't matter if it's fighting or not fighting.
A lot of questions. Let's start from the beginning. Sure. First of all, during the war, everybody has problems. Even you, but you have nice ocean and don't feel now, but you will feel it in the future. God bless.
You don't know that.
God bless. God bless. You will not have war.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that.
That's exactly what we're doing.
You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel. We're going to feel very good.
Feel influence.
We're going to feel very good and very strong.
You will feel influence.
You're right now not in a very good position. You've allowed yourself to be in a very bad position.
That's Zelensky, a person who just learned English, being badgered by two people that are supposed to be the President of the United States and the Vice President. So, is the United States being led by some deep state that doesn't care about America or the rest of the world? And now back on to other things they talk about democracy now. I find it interesting. It's like serendipitous, I guess, is one words, or like magic, or time, or going through time to see things, to show things that people don't know. The rest of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. It's kind of odd. His name is in the media a lot. But do most people in the United States of America know that the United States built a base on Diego Garcia, an island in the Pacific Ocean, just so they could go to combat or cause conflict with China. You see, I like the word combat, battle, or conflict better than saying the word that these people who control the news media uses, because I know the word that they use all the time for combat, conflict, and armed strife doesn't mean what they use it for in many languages. I know the largest language on the planet, that sound pattern means we. In a language that was in North America, and primarily in what is the 13 colonies, across from Newfoundland all the way to Mexico, some would say, some people were using Old Norse as a language of trade. And in that language, the sound pattern they use for battle, conflict, strife, in English, means ours. Oh, sorry, I made a mistake there, freaking Chinese Mandarin. That sound pattern in Chinese Mandarin means I. But if you say warman or woman in Mandarin, it means us. So that phonetic sound pattern, war, in German means was. In North America, this part of North America that I live in, it used to mean our. And in Chinese, some would say, which has been in North America longer than Latin as well, some would say, it means we. And ever since 1984, we tried to get the media to stop using this phonetic sound pattern, war, for combat, battle, strife. But it seems that John Cougar Mellencamp, that's an odd name, is it? Mellencamp, John Cougar Mellencamp. He sang the song War. A few weeks ago, I looked for the older version, sung by the ARs out of Motown. A female group sang it, but it was popularized later by a single male. And I had searched on Google, and I had found it. They say war means this. That's when some of our older generation was learning English. Learning language through music makes you learn it better. Sing along, you sing the things, you learn them better. They say war means this. I think it was the Pointer Sisters. It's definitely a female group. But the earlier version, before it became popular, that song War, it started off with, they say war means this. The media, the bad English language media out of the United States, was the one that made the use of the phonetic sound pattern in this modern English. War being used over battle or combat, conflict zone, strife, armed conflict. Because it's funny how First Indochina armed conflict is called the First Indochina armed conflict. And when I went to school before 1982, I learned the Great Armed War, Great Armed Struggle, our Great Armed Struggle, our Great Armed Struggle against the cold, because Tunguska just happened. Then the First Indochina armed conflict. Now, according to history, that started in the 1600s. But when I learned history, Korea was the first Indo-China armed conflict. But also it started in the 1600s. And then there's a second Indo-China armed conflict. That ended 50 years ago, April 30th. 1975 Common Era, the fall of Saigon, 50 years ago, happened. Today's May 2nd. So 50 years ago, the fall of Saigon, or Vietnam would have ended 2 days before. According to what I remember, I was being brainwashed that I was immortal. That's why the term some people talk about immortal sex cult. It's out there on the World Wide Web. Over 20 years ago, I was actually thinking I was almost 7,000 years old. Like, there's some weird memories, like met William Shakespeare, this, that. There's no way I could have been alive in ancient Egypt time. But I broke out of that brainwashing that was done to me before I was 10. I was brainwashed before I was 10 years old, that I was much older than I am. And between 1982 to 1984, the same fake uncle tried to brainwash us back into that when we tried to liberate ourselves from that in 1982. So the fact that Biden became president of the United States, which was talked about in 1984 at Variety Village, if Biden becomes president of the United States, it means that some people programmed and arranged all the elections in the United States from 1974 Common Era right to now. I had thought Kamala Harris would be president. That's who I actually predicted would be president right now of the United States. Kamala Harris would have won. And it seems like, according to Status Scoop, Kamala Harris would have won if the technocrats working for Elon Musk didn't fearmonger well over 3 million people not to vote. If there was a recount of election or people actually re-voted right now, Kamala Harris might win, for all you know. On another note, I also thought Pierre Poilievre would have won. That was my prediction. Pierre 11 Rabbits. Pierre Poilievre, he lost his seat. It's two predictions I could say of mine that did not become prophecy. They did not occur as they happened. But I know a lot of predictions that we did predict over the years did happen exactly like they happened. I've had dreams exactly how they happened in my eyes, and I've seen them in my dreams 5 days, 5 years before. And there's times I've had dreams and seen something going to happen, and it happened different, or I made sure it happened so a bad thing wouldn't happen. It changed. One of my friends that I met up here, D, I say D2 because he's the second good friend of me that starts with, actually D3. One of my third grade, D4 is four good friends I have. They freaking start with the letter D. The fourth friend that I have, the letter starts with the letter D. He had the same thing. Like, he was telling me about he had seen his son in a dream years before it happened. He had seen his son in a dream, him and his son fishing at a certain lake, certain place, how it happened. And he had put he had a tattoo. He had tattooed his son's name on his body well before he even met the girl that he had the child with. So some people are able to see the future in their dreams, in the astral world, well before it happens. Obi-Wan was saying to me years ago at Sternberg Lake, he doesn't know if it's months, years, days, but people do see the future sometimes. So back to this Diego Garcia. Kilmar Abrego Garcia. His name's in the news a lot. The first time Amy Goodman was talking about Kilmar Abrego Garcia, she kept on saying Diego Garcia because Diego Garcia is a popular item's name, and I guess it was more in her head. The second show she talked about Kilmar Abrego Garcia, she always kept on saying his name correct. So the interesting thing about the name Kilmar, I find it's similar to Killmonger, a character's name in Black Panther. Eric something Killmonger. I have the information here because I don't want to get it incorrect. Nakjadaka Eric Killmonger Stevens. I didn't know the last name was Stevens. I'm kind of off Stevenson over there. But Michael B. Jordan acted as Killmonger. Fearmongers. Monger. Killmonger. Fearmongers are people that keep you in fear to control you. So I find it interesting the name Killmonger. It's like people are kept in fear. He was a United States Navy SEAL. They're kind of bred, broken down, and rebuilt in a way to kill. But that way they're broken down and bred back up to kill is in a way that they're always kept in fear. I'm always in fear that England's gonna come back and take over America. My constitutional rights to own guns. Second Amendment's rights. They're living in fear. Police shooting, taking out their pistol and emptying a magazine and reloading another magazine and emptying it. That's well over 11 shots. It's fear. Freaking fearmongers have them killing too much. Interesting. United States is a country based on fear. Too much killing because they're living in fear. Going on how to break this word down in modern times, right? Killmonger, fearmonger. Diego Garcia. United States built this military base on Diego Garcia because the United States mentality is all about fear. Fear that England's gonna come back and take over USA. They should be more fearful that freaking what they call slave masters were gonna come back and take over the United States. The other name in that movie Black Panther, Chilla. Change letters, you get Chilla, chill, relax. Terra, another word for English, could be earth relaxed. If people kill those fearmongers, get rid of the killmonger mentality, the settler mentality where I always have to be up at arms and ready to shoot someone if they come on my property. Shoot meaning freaking take a bullet and hurt them, as opposed to taking a picture for evidence. See, that's the problem with English. English has too many words that can be duplicated. 1984, we were talking about shooting pictures of the moon during the day, worldwide, to prove observational physics and science, astronomy. But even before that, I look back and I think talking from Greek, someone trying to explain shooting, camera, photon shot or photon captured with a gun. I saw a clip the other day of Yuri Gagarin. I pronounced his name wrong. Yuri shit. The first man to go in space, Yuri Gagarin. Gagarin. He had on the side of his hip something that looked like a gun. But I thought to myself, wait a minute. That's not a pistol. That's not a firearm. That's an old-fashioned photon gun. Most of the terms for science related to photography come from Greek. Photon. Is Greek. Camera. Usually when a term is brand new and someone develops something, it enters all languages as that phonetic sound pattern. And that is a good thing when that happens, because in historical context, if you go way into the future, you could say, look back in time and say, all these languages existed prior to that term photography or photo or coming out, existing. No culture had a term for camera or video recorder or film. Universally, many languages have the term camera, photo in their language. Most languages don't say, I'm going to develop a term that sounds like my language to use in that language as a term. It just enters universally as a language. Like most people say around the word car. And when you say car, people know it means four-wheeler vehicle for a family usually. Or truck. In a lot of parts of the world, if you say truck, people know what you mean. Or lorry. Lots of parts of the world, people might know what you mean. Lots of words. Computer. People know what you mean, even though it's different languages. If you say computer, PlayStation, Xbox, certain things enter all languages as the same term because it's brand new. And it's a mark on when something came into existence. So, when you think about it, I have a memory of my uncle talking to me saying they're developing this photon gun. Right? It was first used. Take a photo. I could show you like how it would look to some, and it might look bad. Like I found this at Walmart around here, and I have a memory of my mom saying, "Look, some people designed something for their photon gun, and people misinterpreting and making actual pellet gun." Got my camera in here. Got my camera in here, and there's a camera attached to this, and my camera's lens is right here. This is a good way. You see people with the mic when they have the mic holding at people. Photon gun. Photography gun. Yeah, so Yuri Gagarin, he had a big gun on his hip here. And my mind just 2 days ago, yesterday or the day before, was like, that's not a weapon. That's a photon gun. It clicked in my head. That's a photon gun. That's a photography, hand grip, freaking fast react. Ooh, take a picture. So it's if you're good with your take a picture any angle, then having to go. Is it faster to go like this? Be right in front of your eyes, or is it faster to like point to any direction that you see something? If you are good with your skills of that. But that's off topic, and let's go to see this Diego Garcia.
Take a peek inside Diego Garcia's mysterious island. Hello everyone, welcome back again with us at Military TV. In this episode, we're going to discuss the mysterious island of Diego Garcia.
Okay, I was wrong.
The
It's not in the Pacific. I thought it was in the Pacific. It's in the Indian Ocean. I am wrong from some time to time. No amount of information I could keep in my head all the time. Something like that, Diego Garcia being in the Indian Ocean, I'll have to drill that into my head. Like, I'm going to have to say Diego Garcia, Indian Ocean, like 20 times in a row. And then hopefully it'll be in my head, or maybe it won't be in my head, because I might not refer to Diego Garcia tomorrow or the day after that. And if I don't think about Diego Garcia for a month or so, I might forget it's in the Indian Ocean. It's not rammed into my head. It's not drilled into my head like 2 times 2 is 4. Or 12 times 12 is 144. When you do your math drills and your science drills more often, and your language drills, you are more skilled at those subjects. Drill does not have to mean bore into the earth. When you bore, it's totally different than when you drill. And a lot of people don't understand that.
All of Diego Garcia is in the Chagos Islands, located on a large shoal area known as the Great Chagos Bank. Diego Garcia is the largest of 55 islands that form the Chagos Archipelago within the British Indian Ocean Territory, and is known as the footprint of freedom for its shape, regional location and strategic importance. The island is located 7 degrees south of the equator, very close to the geographic center of the Indian Ocean. Before watching, don't forget to leave your comment below if you have any suggestions or certain topics to discuss for the next videos. Diego Garcia was discovered by Portuguese explorers in the early 16th century, and its name is believed to have come from either an early explorer's ship captain or its navigator. Under the Treaty of Paris of 1814, many of the islands in the Indian Ocean under the control of the French were ceded to Britain, including the Mauritius and the Chagos Islands. In 1965, these islands became the British Indian Ocean Territory. During the 19th century, the islands were used as plantations, producing copra and coconut oils. Plantations on Diego Garcia were closed in 1971, following a decision to establish the U.S. Navy Support Facility based on the 1966 exchange of notes between Great Britain and the United States. In January 1971, U.S. Navy Seabees were transported to the island by landing ship to begin building the U.S. military presence on Diego Garcia. Today, Diego Garcia is home to 15 separate commands, including the U.S. Navy Support Facility, which functions as the host command. Its position is strategically vital for the U.S., allowing it to project its military strength northwest into the Middle East and South Asia, east into Asia, or west into Africa. It's the most important U.S. base in the Indian Ocean region. Diego Garcia is surrounded by about 60 other atolls. Its coast forms a deep natural harbor, making it the perfect site for a naval base. Diego Garcia has been the site of important military action by the U.S. On the remote tropical island of Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean lies a secretive, strategically vital U.S. military base. Before that, the site had proved its strategic importance for U.S. military operations in the Middle East as a base for Air Force attacks in 1991 during the First Gulf War. From the base, long-range B-52 bombers embarked on missions to Afghanistan in 2001, targeting Taliban and Qaeda positions in the country's mountains. The base is also vital as a refueling point for the U.S. Navy and Air Force. Its deep port is able to accommodate aircraft carriers, nuclear submarines, and other ships. With Diego Garcia accessible only to restricted U.S. military personnel, its secrecy has attracted speculation. Unlike the U.S. military base in Guam, the spouses of personnel are not allowed on Diego Garcia. No journalist has visited. The UN court ruled that it was illegal for the British to demand possession of the islands as a condition of independence. Shortly afterward, the British leased Diego Garcia to the U.S. The UN has now served an eviction notice to the British. Though the ruling is not enforceable, it exerts moral pressure and has placed the future of the base in doubt.
Yep.
The base has served as a launch pad for U.S. military operations in the Middle East, and as a refueling point for Air Force patrols headed to the South China Sea.
Should not be there.
And it was even designated an emergency landing spot for space missions by NASA.
That's the only thing it should be for. International.
Diego Garcia in terms of the facts, the history, and the mystery. Rumors have long circulated of a U.S. prison camp on the tiny atoll in the Indian Ocean.
Should not be there.
Though Washington insists no such facility exists. Diego Garcia is a 17-square-mile horseshoe-shaped atoll in the Indian Ocean's Chagos archipelago. It has a tropical climate with thick jungles and white sand beaches. The island's value is its strategic location between East Africa, the Middle East, and Southeast Asia, making it a vital asset for supplying U.S. naval forces and projecting air power into Asia and the Middle East. During the Cold War, Britain agreed to lease Diego Garcia to the American military for the construction of a naval base on the island. To make way for the base, some 2,000 native Chagosians were forcibly removed from the island by the British government between 1960 and 1973. The islanders have since sued unsuccessfully for the rights to return home.
I hope they win their case.
3,000 to 5,000 military and civilian personnel now live on Diego Garcia.
I hope the
most
natives
of them
win their
American
case.
and British. The island was used as a launch pad for bombing missions over Iraq during the First Gulf War in 1991, the war in Afghanistan in 2001, and Iraq in 2003. America's 50-year lease on Diego Garcia is due to expire in 2016 and is up for renewal this year. There has long been an air of mystery around Diego Garcia, in part because access to the island is so restricted. There have been rumors of a U.S. prison camp on the island for over a decade, but Washington has made repeated assurances that no such prison exists. Thanks for watching, and we hope you enjoy the video.
Dream, believe, love, live. It's kind of hard to dream, believe, love, live when the United States of America has the holy peace pipe illegal, controls the world for brutality, blames China for everything that's bad on the planet, when in China they have social security. And I think it's illegal to work more than 28 hours a week, and everybody's housed. And there's a lot of other good things going on down there. But what do I know? I know when I first watched Blade Runner with my dad in the late 70s or early 80s. And even back then, in Britain, the United Kingdom, they're saying China's the future. Be wise to learn Chinese. I can't whistle right now, so I gotta inhale some sativa. That's cannabis sativa, the real peace pipe, which us American Indians get blamed for something else being a peace pipe when it isn't. But it seems like I'm gonna have to inhale some and show you it's easier for me to whistle if I'm either smoking cannabis or inhaling it in the water. Aye. 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 Ugh. Aye. 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 Ah! 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 Aye. Might sound pretty bad. Aye. But it is what it is. Worldwide, a lot of disabled people can't dream, believe, love, and live well because the United States of America made cannabis illegal. And the United States of America is pursuing a conflict, an armed engagement, a battle against something our grandparents used to call our herb. Let me put that into older language and see what it sounds like. Aye. Yeah, let's see what the R herb sounds like in the. Well, it's not the same as Old Norse. Because I know from my memory that it was voir, voir herb, voir. That even sounds like French. Voir, 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 voisez-vous, voir, voir. Yeah, I think that voir, 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 voir sounds like a French word too. I gotta check that one again. Voir, voisez-vous, voisez-voir, voir, voir. What does it really mean? I know my cousin used to say gay does not mean what they say in many languages. I know if you speak in Mandarin and you say gay wa, gay woman, gay that, you don't mean no freaking same-gendered sexual relationship. I know when they say wa man in Mandarin, it don't mean man of battle. I know that for sure. It doesn't. For sure it doesn't. Bad English out of the United States will destroy the planet because of the bad language being used. They keep on using that phonetic sound pattern war as battle when in people's subconscious mind when they go to sleep and sleep. I've never dreamt in English. It seems I dream in Greek, Old Norse, Mohawk, Mayan, Ojibwe, but not English, not French, not Latin. No. Those are not even near my first or second or third languages. Seems I might even have dreams in Chinese too. I keep on hearing Chinese as I sleep. Like if some ancestors trying to talk to me in Chinese. And Mayan. Sounds odd though. Chinese and Mayan is what it seems like some of the grandparents are speaking in my head. And no Chinese shit torn up in my DNA. No Chinese. No Far East Asian. No Australian. No Arabia. No Siberia. None of that. So I wonder if the out of Africa theory is correct. Because if it is correct, shouldn't that show up in my DNA? If Anzac one does, and Kenswick man does, and Louisa woman does, shouldn't Far East Asia show up in my DNA? Or is our oral history totally correct? And a person that looks like me is an Atlantean, Amazonian, Amaru, American, like described in the Latin text, or Germanic translations, Negros, swarthy, dark of skin, just like some ancient other European tribes are, like the Cheddar Man. Go look up the Cheddar Man fossil. This is my black rock that I found at Colonel Danforth Park off of Mance, end of Mance, Lake Ontario, by the filtration plant. Came from outer space. meteorite. I found this little black rock when I went to put my mom's ashes, 10% of it, in Lake Ontario. The other 90% went into the Caribbean.